Soyona, we're a big fan of you. I'm excited that you're here, and there's so much for us to talk about. I want to talk about our healthcare system. It has so many incredible strengths, but there are also some weaknesses. And unfortunately, in our BIA community, we have a lot of women that come to us and feel like they're dismissed or their doctors aren't really hearing them for what they're going through. So I'm curious, from your perspective, why do you think our healthcare system is broken, especially when it comes to maybe treating chronic disease?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why I think people nicknamed the American healthcare system the sick care system. And, there's a lot of reasons for that. I think mainly because our healthcare system is based on health insurance and health insurance reimbursement. And from the beginning, like 100 years ago, when health insurance was started, it was really started for catastrophic care, for things like ER visits, hospitalizations, things that would cost so much money that people wouldn't be able to pay for it. And now it's kind of permeate our entire healthcare system, including chronic disease management and even prevention of disease. So that's where things get really hairy, because the insurance model is built to pay for more procedures, more things that people are getting done, more medications prescribed. The system makes more money, and pharmaceutical industries make more money, hospitals make more money when more things are being done. So unfortunately, for people that are being cared for their chronic diseases, that doesn't mean that that the incentive is to get them better. Because when they're better, they're not going to the doctor, they're not taking medications, they're not getting hospitalized, and the system doesn't make money. So if you think about it in that sense, our healthcare system is just completely built on a model of sick care, and people who are trying to get better are just getting lost. And that's why functional medicine is such the antidote to that, because most functional medicine practices like ours, like PrimeHealth in Denver, like we don't take insurance for our time, for our services. We can't, because we're spending hours with our patients. Our shortest visit is 60 minutes long. So that's unheard of in the regular medical care system, because insurance will not pay or reimburse a doctor an adequate amount of money to justify spending that much time with their patient. So when you're talking about chronic diseases, they're very complex. They can have all kinds of root causes, and it takes a lot of patient education too, to kind of, get the patient to understand how to take care of themselves so they can get past that illness. And it takes so much time, and the healthcare system right now, it's just not built for that type of care. So that's why with functional medicine, it can get really expensive, because you're having to pay out of pocket for your doctor's time. And we try to do our best to try to make it as affordable as possible, but that's our way of beating the system, our way of getting past the insurance model of short visits and needing to prescribe and do and procedures and all of that, is just not even taking insurance.
I love the way that you explained that. I remember somebody saying, there's so many strengths to conventional medicine. For example, if you're having a heart attack or you broke your leg, like, don't go to the functional medicine doctor, go to the
Yeah,
ER.
don't come to me
Right?
for that.
Yeah, right. Like,
Yes.
we have a lot of strengths. We're able to treat people who have a very serious issue very immediately, which is amazing. But when it comes to chronic conditions, there's something missing here. I'd love to talk more specifically. The population that Yasmin and I work with are women who often have very mysterious symptoms. Often it's PMS, debilitating cramps, just issues around their menstrual cycle. They've identified by the time they come to us that it's a hormonal imbalance, but they're not really sure what to do with that. So how does functional medicine treat, for example, a hormonal imbalance versus conventional medicine?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us know that the conventional approach to most conditions, including hormone imbalance, is to give some type of prescription medication that will kind of suppress the symptoms. And in the case of hormone imbalance for a woman, that's generally birth control pills. For instance, if a woman has PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, or heavy menstruation, or painful periods, or irregular periods, birth control pills is kind of like the antidote to any hormonal imbalance, because what does it do? I mean, it basically is an artificial synthetic hormone that you take, and it tells your body that it actually makes it think that it's pregnant, so you don't ovulate. And then you withdraw the hormones during that week of placebo pills, and that makes your uterus shed and you have a period. But it's not really an actual cycle because you're not ovulating, and it's not a natural, your hormones are not actually even being produced. These are all just reactions to the medication, the synthetic hormones. Your hormones are not doing that. So it's kind of a workaround. It's basically just, let's just not figure out why this is happening, and let's just give you a medicine that's going to make you cycle in this very, predictable way, and suppress the symptoms. And that's pretty much been the solution for, millions and millions of women who have been dealing with issues. But the problem is it's not getting to the underlying cause, and therefore they come off of it, 10, 20, whatever, however many years later, and the symptoms come back, or maybe things are even worse because it's now been decades that they haven't been dealing with the actual underlying issue. So, I fell in love with functional medicine because it actually allowed me to do what I went into medicine for, which is to get people healthy. And it does take a lot of time. In functional medicine, whenever a woman has a hormonal imbalance, we know there's an underlying reason for that. Women are incredibly blessed and cursed at the same time to have this monthly sign that, things are going right or things are going wrong. Like, it's very clear to us intuitively, like if we travel a lot, if we're sick, if we have a ton of stress that month, if we're not eating right that month, not sleeping, all of these different factors affect us so much. And we know that our period can get affected by any of those things. So it's really awesome because we have that, like, that clear sign, like something is wrong, but it's also kind of stressful because we're like, what is going on? And we can feel so lost, and women can feel so unsupported by the conventional approach of, here's a birth control pill. Let's not, dig into what's going on here. So in the functional approach, we have so many ways of dealing with hormonal imbalances because there are so many different reasons for why it could be happening. And we do dig into what those could be. So, we have a 2-hour long intake with our patients, first of all. And that allows us to really dig into their lifestyle, their nutrition habits. What kind of work are they doing? Are they super stressed all the time? What's it like at home? That kind of like psychosocial, emotional situation. We talk about, we do an entire extensive blood panel. We check for deficiencies of various vitamins like magnesium and zinc. And we can address toxins, all these different things that can make a woman's cycle go awry and hormones get imbalanced. And we have examples of people. For instance, I had a patient who came into our clinic with extreme period pain, to the point where she was like on the floor of her bathroom, every month, in pain, had to take pain meds. That was the only thing that was offered to her. And then, we basically changed up her diet a little bit, gave her magnesium, zinc, some fish oils, and literally resolved. I took care of her for a year, and every single period after that was totally fine. Like, didn't even require Advil. So, it's not always like so easy and so quick like that, but that's just one example of how, the functional medicine approach is so different and can create these long lasting changes.
I love that. And I want to kind of go back to, I know with functional medicine, if someone's listening, they're like, dang, like, I don't have the resources maybe to go down that route. But I want to say, like, Ken and I are so passionate about bringing experts like you on to for them to really just start thinking about what kind of questions are you asking, how should they be reflecting on their situation. And like you said, there's so many, for some people, lifestyle and food shifts that actually could make a fundamental difference. And, for me, I was at personal birth control, had no idea what I was doing, but I was on it for like 20 years, always had bad cramps when I was 14. And that's why I took it. I came off of it and it was debilitating. Like I literally, it's crazy to think that that used to be my life with just horrible cramps like your patients. And, with supplementation and seed cycling, at least for me, one month for me, I was like, wait, what? Like I can actually have control of how I'm feeling with small tweaks like this. And obviously that's what opened my mind to functional medicine and why Kay and I started the business. But I just want to encourage people that there's so much that you can do. And hopefully, through conversations like this and seeing what's possible, it kind of opens up their brain, because I know functional medicine and spending, money is not for everyone. So I just always love to caveat that. And, I'm curious, you mentioned a few things in your practice on, the questions you ask and the things you do. What would you say are maybe, some of the common reasons that women are suffering so much with hormonal imbalances from your perspective and from what you see?
Yeah, I mean, some of the most common things that we see are poor diet, inflammation, which can have a multitude of different reasons, and stress. I would say that those are the top three reasons why women have issues with their hormones and their cycles. I mean, those three things, as women, we have this incredible power within us, like, our menstrual cycle. Every single month, we have the ability to get pregnant, to literally create a life inside our bodies. I mean, that is like an amazing amount of power that like we hold in our bodies. And for our hormones, for that to happen, our hormones need to be working in this perfect symphony. And it is a fragile, unfortunately, situation because creating a life takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of power, to create a life, a lot of mitochondrial, energy. And that, mitochondria is the energy source for our bodies and most concentrated in our eggs and our ovaries. So anything that throws off that balance is going to mess with our hormones and is going to decrease fertility. So, when you talk about what we're eating, for instance, like, what we eat is basically a signal to our bodies of like, are we safe or not? So stress can come in many forms. It can come in the form of eating something inflammatory, for instance, something that our body sees as a threat. When our body's under threat for any reason, whether it's famine, whether, we're stuck eating some frankenfoods instead of real whole foods, or we are actually in a stressful situation where we feel threatened at work or in our home, or, just some kind of perceived threat, it is not a safe environment to reproduce. So that is what the signal that is going into your body is saying. And so when you break it down like that, it's kind of more simple. It's kind of easier for us to understand like why, certain foods are going to decrease our, hormone balance, and why, what that actually leads to in terms of decreasing our fertility and like the reasons, like the downstream effects of those different factors.
We were talking about functional medicine being expensive for some people. And I've been in the space of functional medicine for a long time. And I always encourage people, I mean, health is wealth, right? We know that. So for me, it's like functional medicine is an investment in your health. And I always look at it that way. We can spend so much money on technology and different things, but I always encourage people like your health is the most important thing that you can spend money on. And so if you have the ability to find a functional medicine practitioner, I always recommend it. But for people who are, they go see their primary care, that's really all that they have access to. And they're maybe struggling with intense PMS or infertility, or, they suspect that something's going on. What are some questions? What are some things they can ask their doctor to encourage a deeper conversation? How can they avoid maybe some of the medical gaslighting that goes on these days?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's really difficult. Like you said, I always encourage people to go to functional medicine too. And, luckily the good news is there are a lot more affordable options now in terms of functional medicine care. Like, we offer our women's health group, we're going to create one that's virtual that people can access from any state, eventually. And we really want to do that because there's so many people, so many women, especially, who need this type of support and investigation as to what's going on in their bodies. I mean, the problem with conventional medicine and conventional doctors, I'm a family medicine, board certified MD. I went through that training. There was literally like no talk about women's hormones. There was no talk about how to balance a woman's cycle, how different nutrients can be involved, how something like seed cycling, could be useful because it gives you things like magnesium and zinc and fiber and like why those are so important for a woman's cycle. And like, there was just no talk about that at all. And it's just unfortunate. I don't know if there's a way that you can talk to a strictly conventional medical practitioner to really get what you need. I mean, if anything, I would even recommend that someone get their labs done. We can go into labs that I recommend. They could even go to a functional nutritionist or, a functional like nurse health coach or functional registered dietitian. But someone that has like some concept of, the breadth of knowledge that's out there in terms of nutrition, lifestyle, stress, all of these, kind of like basic life support, for women's health things that a conventional doctor just will not be trained in at all. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and I think the good news about so many of the recommendations that come from functional medicine doctors is they're pretty much all low-hanging fruit, and they're all things that people have control over in their day-to-day lives. And it's not like there's one perfect diet for one person and one perfect diet. We could all benefit from eating like more whole foods, exercising more, sleeping more. So I feel like with the plethora of education out there right now, people can kind of take their health into their own hands with all of these like very simple habits that practitioners like you recommend.
Yeah, 100%. Those the habits are the foundation for health, those types of things. Of course, some women do have some pretty major underlying issues that need to be addressed more fully. And we definitely realize that in our women's health group, for instance. We ran a group with like 20 women and we did a lab panel for them. They had various different symptoms. It was not like a cohort of any particular group of symptoms. It was just health and hormones. So women came in with all kinds of different things, fatigue, like really non-specific symptoms, maybe gut issues, maybe irregular cycle, maybe acne, inability to lose weight, all these like non-specific symptoms that women do tend to get gaslit for, just kind of saying, oh, you need to eat less, or, just all these really frustrating pieces of advice that women get that are not investigative at all. And after doing that lab panel, we saw, people had Hashimoto's disease, people had inflammatory markers that were off, people had prediabetes, people had overt hypothyroidism. Um, Pretty much everyone had nutrient deficiencies, so it was like very eye-opening, I think, for them to realize like, wow, like there's actually information out there that I can get that will help lead me to the right path to get me to optimal health. And, going to the conventional doctor isn't necessarily going to help with that.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about those labs actually. Yeah, what were you going to say
The
something?
$1 million question.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Yes, I remember I was talking to somebody, a BIA community member a few weeks ago. She had debilitating periods since she could remember. She was probably in her 50s at this point. She was diagnosed with endometriosis. And I said, oh, you have all these reproductive issues. Has your doctor ever run your hormone panel? Have they ever looked at your blood? Like, she was like, I haven't done any of that stuff. And I thought, wow, that's crazy. She's in her 50s at this point and none of this has been addressed. So let's talk about the labs. What are the labs that you recommend for women who are struggling with hormonal imbalances?
It's a pretty wide ranging panel, and I can kind of talk about, why that is. And we can definitely like post this somewhere for people to look at. But, of course, when you think about your hormones, you want to get the basic hormones tested, like estrogen, estradiol, progesterone, testosterone. And we always like to throw in this adrenal hormone, DHEA. It's DHEAS or sulfate. And it's an adrenal hormone that is tied with adrenal stress, but it's also kind of an androgen. So it's high in like people with PCOS, for instance. So those are kind of like the basic reproductive hormones that are so important for us to know what's going on. However, when you go to a conventional doctor, they might have you, check your estrogen progesterone level, but keep in mind our estrogen progesterone levels are fluctuating dramatically throughout our cycle. So if you check that level on your period, it's going to be dramatically different from when you check it when you're ovulating. So you need to be told, here, I want you to check those levels on, mid-luteal, like day 21 of your cycle, which is what we do a lot of times to check for progesterone rise, which indicates ovulation, or, another time. But a lot of times people are getting their hormones checked and they're like, oh, they're in normal range, but it's like normal range for what, So that's a really big piece of the puzzle that we need to make sure people are getting. And then, in terms of thyroid, like thyroid hormones, I mean, there's a massive panel, like 9 markers that we get for our patients. A lot of times you go to the doctor, you ask for a thyroid test, they get just TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, which is a pituitary hormone, which reacts to, low or high levels of thyroid hormone in your body. And based on that, they say, okay, you're all good or you're not. There's such a bigger piece to this puzzle. You have to look at, the actual thyroid hormones, T4 and T3. What are those levels? Does this person have Hashimoto's disease? So the way that we would find out is 2 antibody levels, anti-TPO antibody and anti-thyroglobulin antibody. If a person has Hashimoto's disease, not only do they maybe have a thyroid condition, but they have an autoimmune condition, which, opens up a whole other world of things that we can do to help, and especially like gut health and things that, relate to your immune system. So getting a full thyroid panel, that is essential for a woman who's going through any kind of hormonal issue, because 1 in 8 women has a thyroid condition. So it's just absolutely necessary that we run that kind of panel. Nutrient levels. I always like to get things like vitamin D, B12, homocysteine, and then iron studies. Those nutrients are, some of the most important ones. In our, initial visits, we also get magnesium, zinc, omega-3s. We run a ton of, nutrients on our patients, but at a bare minimum, getting B12, vitamin D. I mean, these things are so critical to our hormone production and function. And then iron studies, some women have really heavy periods and they could be really suffering because they're just walking around with anemia, overt iron deficiency, hair falling out, thyroid's not working. And all of that can be from iron deficiency. So that's really important, like full iron studies with including a ferritin level. And then metabolic markers. A lot of times women have hormone issues because they're metabolically imbalanced. Maybe they have high insulin, or they're pre-diabetic, glucose levels are off. I mean, that's like picture perfect PCOS for a younger woman. Or if you're an older woman, like perimenopause, menopause, then that type of insulin resistance can cause, terrible periods, terrible like perimenopausal symptoms. So getting that information of like, do we have to think about insulin resistance and like, really focus on nutrition that can help with that. And then inflammatory markers, those are really important too, like high sensitivity CRP or C-reactive protein. Ferritin is also like an inflammatory marker. So we like to look at that too, because what if there's inflammation in the body? Of course, your body's going to feel out of whack. Of course, your hormones are not going to be balanced and your reproduction goes down. And that can be underlying, without someone even knowing. And I also recommend liver markers like AST and ALT. If a woman has, or if anyone has metabolic syndrome, metabolic issues, insulin resistance, your liver can get inflamed. Because basically what your body does with all that excess glucose is it starts putting it in your liver in the form of fat. And that will cause liver inflammation. It's really important to know whether there's liver inflammation involved. Not only is that affecting, inflammation in your body and what that does in general, but your liver needs to detox. It's involved in estrogen metabolism and estrogen excretion. So that has implications for, hormone imbalance in multiple ways. So those are kind of my main, really, really important labs. We definitely go much deeper than that when we actually have a patient working one-on-one with us. But those are essential. Like if a woman is suffering from any kind of hormonal imbalance, and it's not easy to get your conventional doctor to order those things, because not only are they going to say, sorry, your insurance is not going to cover that. They're also not really going to know exactly how to interpret these labs, because they're just not necessarily trained for that. So a work around that is we actually have some direct to consumer labs that we work with and partner with, so that people can get these more extensive panels at an affordable price. Like if you tried to get a panel like that through your insurance and say they denied it, you could be stuck with a bill for like, $1,000 or a couple $1,000s, because of the way that labs inflate their prices to get paid minimally by insurance companies. It's just a whole like game that they play, but unfortunately it leaves the patient sometimes with enormous bills for labs. Like, I mean, I have a patient who was, the lab charged them like $250 for a vitamin D test. I mean, we can get that test for our patients for like under $20.
Wow.
So it's really sad. I mean, the way that our system works like that. But we can work around it. We can use companies like Inside Tracker and Ulta Labs
Mm-hmm.
to get people panels that are more extensive. Through Inside Tracker, I usually recommend the like ultimate panel, which is 45 biomarkers. The cost is $699, but we do have a 20% off code, PrimeHealth Pro 20. So that should be helpful. The only thing I really don't like about that panel is that it does not come with a full thyroid panel. It just comes with TSH. So if you're a woman who has a family history of thyroid disease or has any hypothyroid symptoms at all, which there's so many that, if you're feeling off, then you most likely have at least one hypothyroid symptom. Then, I recommend you probably go with the Ulta Labs option, which if you go to ultalabs.com/primehealth, you can get a 43 biomarker marker test for about $500. And it does include the full thyroid panel and all the labs that I mentioned. So those are two options for people that are really trying to dig into what's going on in their health. And I know that that's not necessarily going to be affordable for everybody. It's still a big chunk of money. And yeah, it's unfortunate that there isn't a better way to do that.
Well, I'm glad that there's options at least, because like you were saying, vitamin D being like 250 with your provider. Imagine doing all I can eat. It like worries me to even think about how much it would be to go through your doctor. So it's amazing that at least there are some other options people can try. And one thing you mentioned earlier when we were talking about labs is the importance of getting, I believe you said, that your estrogen and progesterone at the right time of the month, because I want to dig into that, because I did go to my OBGYN. This was before my own like BIA journey and dealing with my hormones through functional medicine. And I was like, I'm feeling off. Can you do my hormone panel? And she was like, I don't think so. Like, what are your symptoms? And I kind of pushed for it. So we did do it. I get it back. Of course, I don't know what it says, but she's like, no, you're normal. And later I figured out, oh, like, not only is there a definition of normal different, but did you take your, your estrogen progesterone at this time of the month? And I was like, no, I just kind of rolled up and did it anytime. So can you clarify anyone who's listening, like when they should be tracking those markers if they go in and get their blood test?
Yeah, definitely. That's so important. And the doctors that might do this better are fertility doctors, like reproductive endocrinologists. They tend to do your testing, to kind of gauge your fertility. It's not going to say anything about, the more nuanced things that functional medicine doctors work with, like estrogen dominance or estrogen metabolites. And we can talk about like tests for that, which can play a big role in overall hormone symptoms. But in terms of fertility, if you go to an REI doctor or an OB-GYN, they might have you do your tests, like do an estrogen and an FSH level on day like 2 or 3 of your cycle. And that can give you insight as to, whether you have a pretty good follicular or egg reserve or not. So they're looking for, estrogen like under 50 and like FSH under 10. And that can sometimes tell you, what's going on from a fertility standpoint. If you get your labs checked, like we usually do for our women who are menstruating around day 21, or that's if you have like a 28-day cycle.
Mm.
Say if you have a 30-day cycle, you add 2 days to that. So then you get it done on like day 23. Like that's for me, for instance. But that would be mid-luteal, basically between ovulation and your next period coming. That is the time where we can check estrogen and progesterone. And we want to see progesterone above, like somewhere around 10 or above. That will indicate like strong ovulation, like a good robust progesterone response. Unfortunately, it's not possible to always catch it on the perfect day and like the perfect like whatever like 6-hour period that your progesterone happens to be at its highest. So don't get too discouraged if it's not exactly that high. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not ovulating or that you don't have a good progesterone response. It's probably that more likely that you just missed it if you are certainly ovulating from other parameters that you can use, like an LH spike or something like that. But that's really helpful in learning that type of information. But in functional medicine, we do dig a lot deeper. Like we do a lot of Dutch testing, which is something that people might know about. It's a pretty in-depth hormone test through urine and saliva, where we can actually look at your estrogen metabolites. And that's really helpful because when women are creating more harmful or inflammatory, like more oxidative metabolites, when they're transforming estrogen into a form that can be eliminated through urine, those metabolites can actually cause a lot of issues. Like they've even been associated with breast cancer and, estrogen dominance type effect. And that can be really useful information because then we can give certain nutrients to our patients like DIM, diindole methane, which can work wonders for a woman's PMS symptoms. So it's really helpful to do a little bit more in-depth testing with that. We do also get from that Dutch test a cortisol curve. That's also another test that I find incredibly informative for our patients. I mean, a lot of times we feel like we're, not too stressed, like, oh, it's just normal for me, not, just feels like everybody else. But then once you get the data that's showing you, oh, wow, like I'm making like way too much cortisol, or maybe like I'm making no cortisol, it can be very validating for people to see that and recognize like, okay, so there actually is something going on here that there now are solutions for. So I really like that Dutch test because we can get so much more information than just even a blood test.
We have a friend who's a functional medicine doctor, and I remember her saying, I prefer treating men over women because women's bodies are so complicated.
It's
And
true.
yeah, it's very fascinating just hearing you kind of talk about all of the different elements that women need to consider, and why Yasmin and I are such huge advocates of women understanding their cycles, understanding when they're ovulating, like our bodies give us signs, and like paying attention to them and understanding them and tracking them. I swear they should teach women's health in high school or something, where it's like just understanding a
Yes.
woman's body and all of the different things. And I'm sure men could even benefit from that.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to talk about maybe some other lifestyle habits or low hanging things that you recommend to your women patients every single day, to just kind of very simple things that can kickstart their health journey. Maybe what are your top 3 things that we can all benefit from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think women especially have trouble, standing up for themselves sometimes, asking for help, giving themselves what they need. I think these are things that, you can say that all you want, but how do we actually put that into practice, And something that I would recommend for all women is at least like 30 to 60 minutes a day of you time for self-care specifically. And that doesn't mean like, cooking a meal for everybody, it's like get a workout in, go to that yoga class, do that meditation, take a bath, smelling some essential oils, whatever, go for a walk, whatever brings you joy, like truly. I think that that is so essential. And a lot of women, especially women with full-time jobs and multiple children and all of these responsibilities, I think it can get so lost in the chaos and the mix. And I've seen it so much with my patients where they just cannot seem to carve out that time for themselves. And it can just have so many downstream repercussions in terms of their mental, emotional, like spiritual, and even physical health over time. And so that is my main advice if I had to give like one piece of advice to everybody. Of course, what you do with that time, it can change day to day. Maybe you only have 20 or 30 minutes. So maybe you choose to meditate one day. Maybe you choose to, go for a walk some of the other days, do some type of physical exercise or read a book that you find really invigorating and exciting, those things that really nurture your soul. I mean, those are things that I think can get overlooked a lot. And sometimes people just want an easy fix and they just want to take a pill or, do something that requires them, a lot of effort. But I think that women really need to harness that yin energy, that kind of like calming energy. And in a world that is so, masculine driven. And I've found this is like speaking from my own personal experience too, where like, I own a business, I'm a medical doctor, I'm a mother, a wife, there's a lot of roles that I play that require me to be a doer and really task oriented and really hardworking. And I do thrive in that environment. But if I don't balance myself and give myself that time, that downtime, like time to meditate, time to just sit with myself and, drink some tea or, something really calming like that, I can get really out of whack, out of balance. Like I can tell my hormones are off, like my libido gets shot, I don't want anything to do with my husband, in those situations. I just feel like too masculine in my role, I think. So getting that kind of like yin energy, like really harnessing that, I think that's something that all women need in their lives.
I love that. I'm just like nodding my head because it's something, Can I talk a lot about, like similar to you, we're we're just like so passionate about the business. I feel like I'm always going and that's my natural tendency, but it's so important to just pause and tap into that. I love how you said like the yin energy because I don't think I've ever tapped into that my whole life. Like even like thinking about how I was as a kid, I was always a doer and like wanting to do things, and then I went into like the corporate world and that just made me even more masculine. So it's something I think about a lot because I do want to tap into more of the joy and the feminine energy when I can. And I think the balance of it is really important. And it doesn't mean that you can't be that go-getter and do all those things that you want. That's beautiful. But take that hour a day, like you said, to whatever that means, a walk. For me, I love taking like an Epsom salt bath. It's crazy how afterwards I feel genuinely like so calm. It's the best hack in the world. I think one of the doctors on our podcast talked about it and I was like, I'm going to do it, but I love that being your number one recommendation because I think we as women don't even think about how do we like bring joy in our lives? Like what do we want? So I'm just so passionate about that. I feel like I can talk about it for hours, but I love that that's the number one thing you bring up because you see patients, all the time. And can I see women with Bia and we ask questions, we become friends with a lot of our followers and we're all just so similar. Like just spend that, if you can find time to just tap into that yin energy, it would be amazing.
It's actually super interesting if you think about it from a hormone standpoint too. Like how I mentioned, DHEA is this hormone from the adrenal glands. It goes up when you're under a lot of stress. So it can be an amazing hormone. Like it actually helps
Mhm.
us a lot through times where we need it, like cortisol too. But the problem is chronic elevation, it's actually turns into testosterone. It is an androgen. So it's actually very fascinating because the way I'm saying, we kind of get into our masculine energy, like go, 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 stress, working all the time, not giving enough time to ourselves and for like reflection and introspection as, women are kind of meant to be. It literally changes your hormones.
100%. I think Gen Z calls it they're in their soft girl era. And I
Really?
like, yes, it's the soft girl era. Everybody's like, we got to get back to being like soft. And yes, it's
Wow.
because I
I
kind
love
of feel
that.
like, Gen X and our generation, we were more like, we're girl bosses. But
Yes.
now this new generation is coming in and saying, well, let's find the softness again, which is really
Oh,
beautiful.
that is
Um,
beautiful. Yes.
yeah, 100%. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for joining us and talking to us about functional medicine. If people want to reach out to you or get in touch with your clinic or join the women's group, what can they do?
So the best place to find us is our website, primehealthdenver.com. You can book a free consultation where you can talk on the phone with one of our wellness managers and talk about your specific situation, how we can work with you. We have various options on how to do that. So, it's a really nice way to figure out, how we can best work with you. We also have group calls now, like every other Friday. You can get on a group call where one of our providers will talk about functional medicine. You can ask specific questions there. So that's a really nice way to get information and see if you want to work with us too. And our Instagram is Prime Health Denver as well. So you can get in touch with us there as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for doing
Thank
this.
you, Fiona.
Thank you for having me. This was awesome.